Cabin checklist. Pitot cover removed. It is. Beacon light is on. Pilot's handbook is in plane. Airplane weight and balance. 13 gallons. 13 gallons. Got good oil. Thermometer 2450 for weight. That's good. Parking brake is set. Control wheel lock remove. Ignition is off. Avionics are off. Transponder is set to standby. Master battery goes on. Fuel gauge is positive. Annunciators are negative. Avionics on. COM, nav, ADF, squawk, autopilot, DME, avionics go off. Static pressure alternate source valve is in. Annunciator panel test and hold. 1, 2, 3. Flaps extend. Pitot tube on. Step outside and check it. Pitot tube off. Master battery off. Cabin checklist complete. Before starting engine checklist, do the pre-flight inspection. Tie down nuts, bolts, connectors, nuts, bolts, connectors, nuts, bolts, connectors, nuts, bolts, connectors, nuts, bolting connectors. Nuts and bolts and connectors, nuts and bolts connectors, nuts, bolts, connectors, nuts, bolts, connectors, nuts and bolts and connectors. Nuts and bolts connectors, nuts and bolts and connectors, nuts and bolts and connectors. Nuts and bolts connectors, nuts and bolts connectors, nuts and bolts connectors. Nuts and bolts connectors, tie looks good. Fuel looks good. 13 gallons. Oil looks good but level. Nuts, bolts, connectors, tire. Fuel looks good. Propeller, air intake cowling. Static air intake is good. Clear. 13 gallons. And it looks good. Pitot tube is good. Nuts, bolts, connectors, tire. Everything looks open and clear. Nuts, bolts, connectors, nuts, bolts, connectors, nuts, bolts, connectors. Nuts, bolts, connectors, nuts, bolts, connectors, nuts, bolts, connectors. Maintenance hangar report. Looks good. Passenger briefing, there are none. Doors, windows, seatbelts. Windows, seatbelts. Brakes tested, set. shut off in, fuel selector both. Avionics are off, electrical equipment is off except beacon. Circuit breakers check in before starting engine, checklist complete. Starting engine checklist. Throttle 1/4 inch. Mixture full out. Master on. Beacon is on. Oil temperature gauge is off the peg, so I don't need to prime it. Mixture rich. Clear prop. Frequency is set to ground. Starting engine checklist complete. Before taxi checklist. Electrical system. Watch the amps as we turn on the landing and the taxi. Deflected. Alternator off. Really deflects. Volts come on in the annunciator panel. Turn on the alternator. Amps go back. Volts go off. Turn off the lights. The taxi, and it goes back to 27.8. Flaps retract. Set for takeoff. It is flight controls are incorrect. Fuel quantity is what I expected. Set my defroster, my heat, and my vents, and all that. Doors, windows, seat belts. Doors, windows, seat belts. ADOs. TV. So we have ground, tower, ADIS, NDB. Transponder is 1200 standby. Engine instruments are green, and my gusty winds today are 0. Before taxi checklist is complete. Run up checklists. Flight controls correct. They are. Parking brake is set. Flight instruments. Set. Straight and level. Field altitude. Straight and level. Matches compass. Straight and level. Engine instruments are green. Annunciator panel is clear. Flaps are retracted. Trim is set for takeoff. Fuel selector is on both. Engine oil temperature is within green arc. Mixture just a little richer. Throttle up to 1800 RPMs. left. Number 100. Right. Number 90. Oh. Idle. Engine instruments look good. Engine runs at idle. Back up to 800 RPMs. Mixture a little bit leaner. Autopilot is off except for expected altitude. Peter was on or off as warranted. ATIS, get it?
Norwood Airport Information Golf 1403 Zulu. Wind calm. Visibility 10. Sky condition clear. Temperature 18. Dew point -6. Altimeter 3012. Visual runway 35 in use. Landing and departing runway 35. VFR aircraft say direction of flight. All aircraft read back hold short instructions. Advise controller on initial contact you have Golf. Norwood Airport Information Golf.
Okay, so I have ATIS. And the altimeter is set to 3012 as they told me. I'm taking off on runway 35. Heading bug is set correctly. Beacon, taxi, nav. Get ground clearance.
Norwood ground, Cessna November 7274 Hotel, ready to taxi, straight out departure with Golf. Cessna November 7274 Hotel, taxi to and hold short of runway 35. Using taxiway Echo Alpha. Contact tower at 126.0 when ready. Taxi to and hold short runway 35 via taxiway Echo Alpha, Cessna 74 Hotel.
Run-up checklist is complete. Taxi checklist. Mixture a little bit richer. Release the brakes. Throttle up and stop moving. Get ready to shut everything down. Nope, make sure it can stay up. Brakes are holding. Turn coordinator is working. Heading indicator is correct and turning, and compass is turning. Taxi checklist is complete. Before we take off that whole checklist, doors, windows, seat belts, doors, windows, seat belts, transponders set to altitude, wing flaps are at 0, trim is set for takeoff, pitot 2 heat on or off is warranted. Ignition is on both. Engine instruments are green. Annunciator panel is clear. Gate tower clearance.
Norwood Tower, Cessna November 7274 Hotel, ready at runway 35, departing straight out. Cessna November 7274 Hotel, cleared for takeoff, runway 35, departing straight out, approved. Cleared for takeoff, runway 35, Cessna 74 Hotel.
Landing lights on. Strobe lights on. Mixture full in rich. Before takeoff. At hold checklist complete. Okay, after landing, I'm off the runway. Gonna clean up the airplane. Landing lights off. Strobe lights off. Flaps go up. Contact ground.
Norwood Ground, Cessna November 7274 Hotel, request taxi to parking. Cessna November 7274 Hotel, taxi to General Aviation Parking, via taxiway Charlie. Taxiing to General Aviation Parking, using taxiway Charlie, Cessna 74 Hotel.
Lean ground operations. Here we go. Securing airplane checklist. RPMs 800. Mixture lean. Parking brakes set. Transponder to standby. Avionics are off. All electrical equipment and lights are off. Roster vents closed. I'm going to do the max ground check today. Go to idle cutoff. Full halt. Ignition switch off. Master battery off. Beacon on. Fuel shut off out. Fuel selector left or right. Trim set for takeoff. Take the headphones off. And then we do control locks, wheel cocks, tie down, pitot cover. Securing airplane checklist complete. Here's the checklist that I use. I recommend if you're going to use it that you pause and write down each step. You're going to have to memorize them for your flow anyways, so Writing it down for one first time isn't going to hurt.